Hello, welcome to No Veto Video. I'm Catherine.
And I'm Carson. And this week on No Veto Video, we're going to be telling you about Happy Death Day from 2017. Directed by Christopher Landon, written by Scott Lobdell, and starring Jessica Roth, Israel Brossard, and Ruby Modine.
Happy Death Day is a typical college slasher movie with an interesting twist, in that the main character is forced to relive the day of her death over and over again.
I chose this movie because with our recent subscription to MoviePass, I can be a little less picky about what I see in the theater. It looked kind of captivating from the trailers, but I wasn't quite sure on it going in, and it turned out to be pretty good.
I'd agree.
I kind of liken this to the Groundhog Day of horror movies.
Yeah, I think there are some really important similarities and some really important differences. Even from we also had the benefit of watching this when we were absolutely alone in the movie theater. There's a benefit to seeing this in a crowded movie house, I could see. But there's also something fun about watching it basically in a private screening. Because even right from the very beginning of the film, it was already in on the joke, and so were we. There's just a lot of love and joy in this film for the genre of like teen slasher flicks.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, I didn't find it an entirely teen slasher trope type movie. There also felt like a murder mystery involved.
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't just your run-of-the-mill movie. It did unique things.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think anytime we say that a movie belongs to a category or whatever, there's a way in which it helps you just to sort of frame the response to it. But hopefully no movie is just like, well, I checked off all the boxes for my genre and now I'm done for the day. Hopefully every storyteller or every story has sort of its own unique spin on what it wants to do. One of the ways in which this takes its own unique spin is that instead of lots and lots of people getting killed, it's one person getting killed over and over and over again. That's
not to say a few other casualties don't happen along the way, some of the repetitions just due to collateral damage. But yeah, there's one target over and over. And it's unique to see differing ways. It sort of like how Bill Murray in Groundhog Day changed things up a bit each day, trying to either escape or relieve boredom. Right.
Yeah. So the character played by Jessica Roth, her name is Tree. She starts the movie. She has a very interesting character arc. Mm-hmm. But what's nice about this film is that it doesn't resolve when she's sort of completed her arc. She completes her arc and then it goes a little further.
Yeah.
And that's nice because it's not like saying, well, once you become a different person, then you're let out of this. It's not like saying your personality is what's keeping you in this loop. We don't actually ever know what keeps her in the loop.
Yeah, and it doesn't actually seem to be her personality, unlike some other movies that use this cliche.
But it's nice to see somebody on an arc. And she brings some real nuance to what could be a pretty unnuanced character. There are other sorority sister characters in this film who are not on arcs and who are like exactly as thin as like you might think a character in a slasher film might be, but the main character has the benefit of having some heft to it, and I like that.
And the ones that don't feel hollow don't get a lot of screen time, or when they do, they're kind of abused by the other characters.
Right. It's such an interesting university. It's nominally set in Louisiana. And sometimes when they're off campus, it feels like Louisiana. And sometimes when they're off campus, it feels a whole lot like LA.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking some of it felt maybe a little like New York.
Oh.
big city though, like large, not southern city.
Well, see, the reason why I said that is that, like, at one scene in particular, when they go to a diner, in the background of the exterior of the diner shot, there's, like, these really tall palm trees, which you can see in Louisiana. But there's also the shadow of mountains, and you don't see that in Louisiana. And
that's a good point.
You know, it's sort of like one of those, like, where are we sort of places. There's a whole page on TV Tropes about the mountains of, I don't remember, Oklahoma or something like that. And yet, for all of that, there are times where it does really feel grounded in a particular place. And then that particular place is this university. Whenever the film goes away from campus, and it makes sense why they need to, but it feels so much weaker whenever it does.
Yeah, and really this could have been set anywhere that had a large university with a relatively large university hospital attached.
Right.
I mean, it could have been Chicago, it could have been Louisiana, it could have been anywhere.
So the university's mascot is this baby character, which is at once menacing and also sort of evocative of, like, how college can be. That there is this sort of sense of, like, you're not formed yet. And if for anyone watching who's in college, like, you feel adult, and yet you're really not yet. As somebody who's been out of college now for a long time can attest. I look back on our college days, and that's where Carson and I met, and it's like, wow, we knew nothing. Like, we had no idea. And so for me as an adult watcher of this film, the mascot actually works on a couple of different levels. On the one hand, it is a creepy, like, 1930s kind of Cupid doll looking baby, but on the other hand, it also has a certain sense of, like, yeah, they're just trying to figure their way out of this whole mess.
And I like how you brought up the face itself was kind of creepy. It is a little reminiscent of college, where much of the time I felt like I was surrounded by
corn.
Well, yeah, that's just because we went to a small college in the middle of nowhere. No, I felt sometimes like I was surrounded by these kind of evil childlike people.
And I have to say, this is something that, like, for me is, like, a much later realization, right? Like, you don't, at the time when we got together, it was like, well, of course, you know, we can form adult relationships. And then it's like, now looking on 20 years later, it's like, oh, yeah, I mean, we did, but, like,
yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so much that you don't get right. There's a character in this that we didn't talk about yet. Carter, who's sort of the main helper good guy, who turns out to be an actually good guy, but he has a roommate who is just not
the creepy childlike student we were talking about.
Not ready for prime time. Like, and yet it's such a fun portrayal. There's just so much fun going on in this movie. There are scary parts, and I am a chicken, and there are parts that cause me to jump up out of my chair. But for the most part, I was just having a great time in this movie, and there were so many different points where it's like, oh, this is awesome, or yeah, this is great. Oh, you go, characters. Like, the day that she decides to just, you know, on a lark, leave the dorm unclothed, for example, because why not? Like, the middle montage of, like, all the different ways that you try a day that's resetting. It's my favorite part of Groundhog Day, and it's my favorite part of this movie too, because that is where the detective sleuthing happens, but there's also just, like, lots of fun with playing around with a day that's resetting.
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about the main character tree developed throughout the show, as well as your discussion on the nature of relationships in college. Even the people that we still associate with, that we hang out with, or that we talk to on a pretty regular basis, the nature of the relationships have changed since college in the intervening 20 years. And I think Tree's development sort of shows that also. She matures a lot over the course of however many days she does
2
this.
weeks.
Yeah. So it's a good analog for that.
Yeah. And yet she's sort of blessed to have a few people, like she is blessed to have 2 people in her life who are interested in changing and growing too.
Mm-hmm.
One doesn't know it because he keeps having to do the same thing over and over again, but he's sort of adaptable and game. And then the other is her father, who, well, if I'm going to portray the fact that I'm like old, it's like right from the very beginning, I'm like, call your father. Call your father. Like,
she did. She yelled this in the theater.
It was so bad in the theater. But there was a sense that it was like, well, like, why wouldn't you reach out to that, character? And it turns out that there's a really good reason. But then once that reconciliation happens, I think it just adds this richness to a story that is fun and silly, but also, talks about loss and talks about the ways in which we transform because other parts of our lives are too painful to really work through. Mm-hmm. This sorority, now neither Carson nor I went through for real sorority fraternity experiences. And there's just, so a lot of this is ours just sort of weighing in from what pop culture tells us about what sororities and fraternities are. But this particular sorority is mm-hmm. the worst that I've ever seen. And the fact that this character would have been somebody who was kind of like a queen bee of this sorority. She wasn't the president or leader or whatever, but she clearly was somebody who had been at home in this sorority right up until basically she started getting killed every day. It just sort of bespeaks about how things had gotten off track for her. The fact that you would willingly join an organization wherein people don't eat.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned in Okja, eating is very important to me. And the idea of willingly surrounding yourself with a bunch of people who are going to judge you for eating just does not sound like a good time for me. So. Well,
and she even mentions that she regrets the person that she's become. She does it at least 3 or 4 times. And
it's part of that growth. And not to come down harshly on Greek systems, but if who you are is defined entirely by how little you eat, I think there's probably some thinness there, and not just physically. So
another thing I liked about this movie, and I'm going to work really hard not to give a spoiler, but unlike Groundhog Day and some of the other movies I've seen that use this as a concept, the repetition, something subtle changes in the world each cycle through. And that was kind of interesting. You don't find out till about halfway through the movie. But there is something that actually keeps changing.
Really?
Yes. You know it.
You'll have to tell me later. I've clearly forgotten.
But I found that made it unique, even if everything else involved didn't make it unique.
I think even if you don't end up seeing what it is Carson's alluding to, you're still going to enjoy the movie because I can no longer recall what this might be, and I'm still having a lovely time.
They explicitly tell you, so don't worry about it, you'll catch it.
Let's see, so some other characters who are interesting to you or that you enjoyed?
I found a number of the characters relatable. I don't remember the student's name, but the one who says, I don't care what you all say, I'm hungry, and just sits down with a whole tray of food. I could relate to that character. If you're hungry, eat, as Catherine has said twice now. Food, it's important for life.
Well, I would say, yes, she does sit down, but it isn't until she's shown acceptance that she is comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
That is pretty painful, actually. especially since she's one of the few characters of color.
Yeah.
In the whole film, and so to be judged for being fat, yeah, I don't know. That was one of the few places that caused me a little twinginess in the movie, actually.
Carter was relatable. He was kind of awkward. I mean, I wouldn't know anything about that, but
I actually really enjoyed having Carter as a character in this film. We were working on our way out of the theater, just like how easygoing he was. Like, she doesn't have to spend a long time trying to convince him about what her experience is. That he just sort of takes it on faith and tries to be helpful insofar as he can. And even when she says, "Look, I'm not really asking for you to fix this," he's still there to be supportive, and that's nice.
Her dad was probably a relatable character. We didn't actually focus on him enough to... There were a couple of very important interactions, but they were all brief. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the interaction with her father, the interaction with her professor, the interaction with her professor's spouse, those are all they're important for the film, and they move the film along in important ways, but they are very brief.
Well,
so.
And they tell you a lot about her nature, and who she was, who she is, and who she's trying to get back to being.
And I think, in the sense, who she wants to become, which is not merely about going backwards, but that there's a newness to
That's true.
The other side of her life. Yeah. So.
Well, and getting back to where she was, but then adding, so stripping off the negativity. Yes, but the cycles, the repetition is sort of like that, a rebirth, getting back to, and then sprouting out further.
Which leads me to wonder about the presence of birthday in this movie.
I forgot about that. The entire movie is both her birthday and her death day.
So there is this sort of sense of like rebirth, death, you know,
like the phoenix.
Like a phoenix. but in the sense of like, you know, at the end of it all, she makes it through her birthday and into a new life and into new relationship and into new way of being in relationships that she's had already. Any last thoughts?
I would like to potentially see them use the same concept, not in a direct sequel, but maybe about someone else and the interactions that they go through in their attempt to make their own life better while solving another murder mystery.
And part of me hopes that they leave this alone.
Yeah, and part of me hopes that they're completely done.
Let's see, for me, last thoughts. It's just a good movie, and I think you guys will enjoy it, and I hope you check it out. If you have some last thoughts, if you've seen Happy Death Day and want to respond to us, or if you want to answer our holiday-themed writing prompt, which is, what holiday do you celebrate in the winter time, and is there a special movie that makes that holiday special that you have to watch every year? Come and let us know. You can write to us down below. We certainly would love to be interacting with you guys, or you can come and find us on novetovideo.com, where you'll find other episodes that we've posted and upcoming news or something like that. Anyway, we don't really have a lot of news right now.
Every week on No Veto Video, we both override the veto, or the no veto, and pick movies that, if you like this, you should also check out these other movies. My pick, I have two, like I often do. First of all, 50 First Dates. It's got the repetition, but in a rom-com setting, and they do some unique things. And my second one, if you like the whole murder mystery set around a sorority of not very nice people, Sorority Party Massacre would fulfill the same need.
Okay, so my override recommendation this week is Scream. At this film and Scream kind of have the same DNA, which is a deep love of an art form, but also being in on the joke. So when I was describing this movie to my brother, I said, you know, it's sort of Scream meets Groundhog Day. So check out Scream. I think you guys might enjoy that if you haven't already seen it. We have, of course, referenced Groundhog Day a lot in this review. So that's a recommendation from both of us. Groundhog Day is worth checking out as well. Alright, so 51st Dates, Sorority
Party
Massacre, Scream, and Groundhog Day. You have a lot of override this week.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And speaking of which, Christmas is the holiday that Carson and I both celebrate. So we will be taking next episode to talk about what are some of our movies that we need to watch in order to make it the holiday season. So we'll be talking about a couple of those. Just a quick sort of holiday spectacular. And then we'll pick up with normal episodes of No Veto Video in 2 weeks.
So thank you, and subscribe down below. And until next time, this has been No Veto Video.
Bye.